of a few housekeeping items before I have Dr. David Wood, our chair, introduce our guest speaker today. For CME credit for this afternoon, please call in to that number listed on the screen and put in your event ID. If this is the first time you are using our CME, you will get a text within the week asking you to identify yourself, and that's how they will give you credit for the event. If you've done this before, you certainly know how this works. They already have you in their system. Even if you are a medical student or a resident and don't need CME credit, please call into that number and get the credit, because that's how we count our numbers for Grand Rounds, and it helps with our accreditation. Also, I must remind you that at the end of the session, please fill out an evaluation form, because again, that's what keeps us accredited. Without much further ado, Dr. David Wood, our chair.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Hatim Omar. I got his name pronounced correctly that time. He's a colleague and has become a dear friend. He's a tremendous advocate for teens and youth, as you'll hear in his talk. And before I introduce him, I just want to mention that right at 1 o'clock, we're going to have a panel after the talk, and Dr. Omar will stay, but we're also going to have a panel discussion from folks leaders in our community around teen suicide. So I know that many of you are in clinics and things can't stay, but if those of you that can, please do stay for the community forum at 1 o'clock. So Dr. Omar is originally from Palestine. He did his training in Bulgaria at Medical Academy, Sofia, Bulgaria. He actually in Bulgaria went on to do a residency in obstetrics and gynecology. Then he came to the United States and did a residency in pediatrics and a fellowship in adolescent medicine at Morgantown, University of West Virginia. He practiced there for a while in West Virginia, but then moved to the University of Kentucky, where he's been for about 18 years. He's built an adolescent program from the ground up that now has a major influence on the lives of kids in that region. About 20,000 visits per year, 6 physicians, and how many psychologists? 6 psychologists, working not only in a clinic, but also doing outreach to the rural parts of Kentucky. And for that work, he's gotten, for all of that work, he's gotten numerous recognition, both at state and national level. And he also is an academic and publishes on these issues and actually edited a book on teen suicide prevention. So really he has tremendous accomplishments in this area, and I'm just thrilled to have him come here. And I do want to make one mention. His traveling companion, Yoav Merrick, who is there, pediatrician visiting from Israel. He is the editor of a number of international journals that Hatim and I have published in. So we want to welcome Yoav as well. But with that, thank you very much.
Thanks. So it is not a fun topic to talk about, but I think it is a very important topic. How is the sound, by the way? We can adjust it if it's bad, okay? I think I want to start with saying that my approach to youth suicide prevention is not like anybody else's. It might be the worst approach or the best approach, I don't know, but it's different. Because for the most part, everyone talks about mental health. And I think that youth suicide has nothing to do, not nothing, but very little to do with mental health. I think it's more a public health problem that has a mental health component, not a mental health problem going backward. And I think because of that, we are failing to do enough about it. Because what we are doing across the country and across the globe is wait for somebody to be suicidal or badly depressed and then try to do something about it. So we're going to go backward. And the other part is that every generation, like our generation, thinks that we were better as teenagers than teenagers today. Every generation thinks that. And you have there, and I always go back to history. Obviously, I don't take money from anybody for anything, so I have nothing to disclose. We go back to history, and if you look 3,000 years ago, Plato says that, oh, the sun feels equal to his. If I remove that name there and you read this quote, you will think somebody wrote it today. right? Because that's how it is. Every generation was, I mean, and on top of the situation, in the name of liberty and equality, sex is everywhere. That's 3,000 years ago, right? So other quotes, this is Shakespeare, basically was hoping that all teenagers will go to sleep at around age 10 and not wake up until they are 23 and move on. And Yoav's favorite one is Mark Twain, who said, well, when I was 14, my father was very ignorant. I could hardly stand him. But now when I'm 21, he seems to have learned a lot, right? So the fact is that teenagers did not change. In any generation, teenagers are the same. They go through the same thing. What changes is us, the society, and the environment around them. And when the environment changes, the teenage behavior changes according to that environment. Not because if you believe for a second that a 13-year-old wakes up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a bad kid today, then I don't know what to tell you, because that never happens. It is what we do to them, intentionally or unintentionally, is what makes it what it does. Have in mind that teens need until about age 24 to finish brain development and becoming competent. And that includes the most important area in the brain in terms of decision making, which is the prefrontal cortex, that really doesn't complete until about that age. And that's science. That's not rumors. And the sad part is we in the community and politics, nobody looks at this, right? Except the rental car companies and the insurance companies, right? Now you know why the cutoff age for insurance and rental car is 25. It's not an arbitrary number. They look at the science, unlike the rest of the community. And we have to understand that. And when we tell our kids that, oh, you can have a pilot license at age 16. My son got his pilot license exactly at his 16th birthday, but you can't have a driver's license until 6 months later. And then you can vote at 18 and serve in the military, but you cannot have a beer until you're 21. What is it that we are doing? You know, we as a society are confusing these kids all the time and not letting them understand. Have in mind that all kids are going to have these issues, hormone level changes, brain structure changes, and the psyche that they go. And that causes all while they are changing. Their physique, you know, their physique is changing, their appearance is changing, their feelings are changing, their cognition is changing. All those things around them, the environment, the internet, the media, all that is changing, and they are struggling to catch up while they still don't have the brain power to make it. And that leads to this, is why do our kids die? If you look at adult death rates in the US, it's traditional, you know, heart disease and cancer and things like that. Teens will die from things they do, not from something that happens to them. So you have accidents and homicide. Notice that suicide is now the second leading cause of death. It used to be the third in the US. Here, among other unintentional injuries, all kinds of other stuff. They're jumping off skateboards and this and that. And among other here is sexually transmitted infections and pregnancies and eating disorders and all of that. If you add it all up, roughly 95% of death rate in teens is because of something that they do, not something that happens to them. And only 5% are caused by actual disease that they don't have a choice for. So on paper, we should be able to prevent 95% of the death rate in teens. And we are not perfect, so we are never going to do that. But at least we can make a dent in it and decrease it a little bit. So why do I look at this as a public health? The definition of public health is basically something that affects the entire population one way or the other. And if you don't do anything about it, it will continue to get worse. So, and the public health approach to any problem is first, is there a problem? Define if there is a problem or not. If once you define that it is a problem, you start developing some interventions to work on it and improve it. And then test those interventions, see if they work in different places. And if they do, then move ahead and make them valid everywhere. So is it a problem? Well, here's one number to see. Any of you knew this number? That suicide actually kills more than all wars and all homicides combined in the whole world? Right? We keep screaming about wars and how many victims. in the last 60 years, suicide killed more than all the wars that you hear about and all the crimes, all the homicides combined. So it must be a problem. If you look at the actual numbers in the US, and those are slightly older number, I'll give you the update number in a minute, but every 17 minutes, somebody's dying from suicide. That's roughly about 89, 90 people every day. Just imagine if you have a passenger jet with 90 passengers in it every day crashing. I'm sure we would be doing something about it. But this we ignore. We keep going. So the one I wanted to show is this. About almost half of the people who commit suicide are already under care by mental health. That doesn't mean mental health is not good. It just means that it's too late. By the time they get to that stage, we already missed our best opportunities. We need to start before they got to mental health. These are the latest number in 2013. In 2013, we lost a total of 42,000 people to suicide. That's 1 every 13 minutes in this country. Groups like young people, especially if they have LGBT community, kids with disabilities, kids with chronic illness, Native American, Alaskan kids, have a very, very high rate of suicide. Then you have the college students. 30% of college students feel either depressed or unhappy or unsure. And suicide is the second leading cause of them among them also. And what our cost, that's the sad part, is we are paying a ton of money for treatment. If we invest probably 10% of that amount of money for prevention, we would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of money. But that's something I could never convince politicians to understand. How do you know? Well, I know that you're spending 80 billion. Let's try 1 billion for prevention and see what's the difference. They never get it. This is the slide I use when I talk to every senator and any government official anywhere, because it's really illustrates. So suicide in teens kills more than cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, chronic disease, all of them combined. Like in Kentucky, for example, last year, we lost 47 teenagers to suicide and 6 for all those diseases combined. That's almost 8-fold dying from, yet we spend about $700 on those things for every 1 penny we spend on suicide. And that's what's wrong with us. Right? I mean, if we have something that's killing 47 kids and we spend 1 penny on it, and we have a lot of things that kill 7 kids and we spend $700. I'm just giving you the proportions, but this is the fact of life, is that we are not doing what we are supposed to do. So it is the second leading cause of death among all kids 10 to 24. That's more than 5,000 young kids in the US dying. Have in mind that for every completed suicide, there are between 20 to 40 attempted suicides. So add those numbers up and you get the picture. It is traditionally, girls used to attempt suicide more frequently, but boys completed suicide more. Unfortunately, in the last few years, this has changed some. And the reason is that boys tended to use firearms and girls used to tended less lethal means. And that accounted for, despite the fact that they're attempting more, they're dying less. But in the last few years, these things have changed. We have a new trend where more and more girls are attempting using firearms. And if you go when this started, which is in 2007, since then, suicide rates had moved up to the second cause of death. And by 2013, we moved from third leading cause of death to the second, because we have a lot more girls using firearms, and thus more death rather than injury or attempt. The fact is, firearms are used in the vast majority of suicide in this country, and they account for most of the death rate that is related to suicide. Yet we keep glorifying guns. This is not about, I could care less about politics and who wants to have guns or not. What I care about is our kids and how do we protect them. A lot of you hear about this lady that was bragging about how her 4-year-old son is so good at training with guns and whatever until he shot her. And this is something we see every day. Look at this headline. Just between January and May of this year, toddlers killed 23 people. Toddlers that are kids under age 4. So it isn't about having a gun or not. Have all the guns you want, just lock them away from their ammunition or learn how to use them safely, not have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old using them. It is also the second leading cause of death among college students. And the rates of youth suicide have tripled over the last 50 years. So we're not doing very good with that. So I think we all agree it's a problem. It is a public health problem. It's affecting all of us. If it's the second leading cause of death, if it's tripled in the last 50 years, if it's getting worse, it's bad. And we need to do something. And the first thing we need to do is understand why do these things happen. So among young people, like among everybody else, and I'll tell you the difference between a young person and older, but basically anybody who gets to a point where I'm hopeless, I don't think my life is worth it, then they are more likely to commit suicide. So usually this is what you see going on in their minds. I can't stop the pain, I can't think clearly, I can't make decisions, I can't eat or sleep. Nothing is worth it for me. When somebody reaches that point, they are likely to start thinking about, what the heck, why should I stay alive? Right? The difference is more of the adults think this over time. I lost my job, I'm trying to hang in, I'm trying to find a way to pay my mortgage. It takes months and things and years, and when everything goes, they try to get help. When all that is not working, then maybe they start thinking suicide. With teens, that's not the case, because as I talked about in terms of brain development and decision making, they're concrete. The average teenager doesn't understand that if I have a problem today, I won't have it tomorrow. If I have a problem now, it's going to last forever. Of course, tomorrow I'll forget about it, but for now, it's there. So an average 14-year-old is, if he gets in a fight with his dad, or argument with his dad, or grounding in school, or a girlfriend broke up with him, or some bully told him something, to them, that's it. There is no tomorrow. And that's why you see those compulsive decisions among teens, and I'll share more of that information about that. This is actually, I don't know why it looks like that, but it's an actual letter. I get on average 200 to 300 emails a day from kids. And this kid not only wrote it by hand, but took the time and scanned it and sent it to me. And basically this is what, I don't know, it doesn't show well, but I failed to eat, I failed to make any decision. It's essentially the same that I was saying. That's the typical thinking. She was a 16-year-old that got bullied in school and didn't have anybody to talk to, and this is what she was thinking. It's just, that's the end of my life and the end of my world. And that creates a phenomena that's different than adults, which is called same-day suicide. And that's my biggest argument about, is it a mental health problem or a public health problem? So this is an example. There's a 16-year-old boy who never had any mental health issues, any problem whatsoever, got suspended from the school for whatever reason, went home, and his mom, instead of listening to his, at least to listen to his side of the story, she just grounded him, and they got into a loud argument. And he was unlucky that there was a gun at home, so he used it and got killed. Again, this kid has no depression, no anxiety, nothing. So you can't do anything with him with mental health. His problem is he didn't have anyone to turn to talk to. You know, he tried with the mom would not listen, it's over. If he knew there's somebody else, probably wouldn't. You'll be surprised to know that the lowest suicide rate, say, in the country here in the US, is among inner city African-American kids. Because they might not have a dad, but they have an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, somebody else to talk to. The Middle East, like Muslim countries, have zero suicide rate. Mainly because it's the same thing. People just, the whole village is your family. So each teenager has somebody to talk to. And that's, I'll show why is that important in a minute. But this is another kid, same thing. He's straight A student, what you would call nerd by teenage standards, excellent in school, everything. And one day, bullies got to him and said, hey, why don't you go home and shoot yourself? Nobody will miss you. And basically, that's what he did. He went home and get killed. Now I figured, I think I sent this talk in a PDF, and they translated it to PowerPoint, and that's why some of those things look unusual. But that's, you get the picture. So again, this kid, the factors was he had nobody to talk to, he thought his life is over, and there was a gun at home. all three factors worked against him. So if you look at the data, roughly about 33% of same-day suicides in teens who are under age 17 are same-day suicides. They have nothing to do with mental health. It's something happened today and they're dead today. So if we provided them with a support system ahead of time, and if they didn't have gun at home, they would be alive. And that rate continues, almost 20% at age 25 to 44. So if you look at this age group that I'm working with, which is the 0 to 24, on average about 25, 27% of all suicides are same-day suicides. There is no mental health component in it. And then you add the internet and what it's doing to our kids, because again of that still not enough decision-making and growth. I don't know how many of you here heard about this young lady who was an honor student, but who was manipulating people. And she continued to encourage this young man to commit suicide, and he wanted to back off. He's sitting in the car, and she kept telling him to stay inside the car in the garage and keep running until he died, and because he didn't want to upset her or whatever. But those are the type of things that we're seeing more and more. People cyberbullying, people who are infatuated with somebody or the other, and young people using that to their advantage to do these things. So all those cases would have been prevented if we have done something ahead of time, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the features of young adult suicide and teen suicide is that they are impulsive. There are lots of same-day crises. There's a lot of interpersonal context, something that they cannot handle, cannot deal with. A lot of them are going to use firearms that are available to them because their parents have them. And those who are not same-day suicide, usually they're going to have signs or show or try to get some help one way or the other if we are paying attention. So I think this is the most important slide in the whole talk, because it gives you a pretty good idea. If I see a kid now and I want to decide what's their odds of being dead within the next 48 hours, this is how I would decide, and this is proven by science. So if they have been discharged from a mental health unit in the last week, their odds of suicides are 280-fold more than regular. And that's the first reason why we shouldn't wait until we get the kids to be admitted. Once they're admitted, it's pretty much too late. The second thing is if they have been discharged in the last year, and it is about 35, the odds are 35 is higher. Can you see it, or is it out of focus? I think something is not right, but anyway, I'll tell you the number. If they have attempted suicide before, their odds are 22 times higher. So the more attempts they have, the worse it will get. Having a gun at home, with everything being equal, two kids have exactly the same family structure, the same home, everything is the same. But one kid has a gun at home and the other doesn't, that's 5 times more likely. So again, that's what we try to do. I'll show you later on, just in one community where they're just restricted access to guns at home, where the ammunition and the guns are separate, and they had a huge drop in suicide. I always remember this kid who, something happened in school, and he went home, and he was telling me, he tried suicide, I talked to him like 3-4 days later, and he was saying, well, I went home and I really wanted to kill myself. I knew my dad has a gun, and I started looking for it. It took me 40 minutes to find it. Then I found it, and it didn't have bullets on it. I started looking for the bullets, and after 40 minutes, I gave up. That's your illustration of what we deal with. Had he found the bullets, that kid would be dead. So it's simple things like that make a difference. Because again, the most common scenario you see, all of you parents who have teens, your daughter comes back from school and she's crying and mad, and my boyfriend just broke up with me, it's the end of my life. And usually the response of the mom is, oh, don't worry, I mean, there's another fish in the sea and you will have another one. You don't get it. To her, it is the end of her life. She is absolutely convinced that there is nobody else and she's never going to have another boyfriend. So when the mom says something like this, that reinforces the notion that, yeah, your life is over, because even your mom doesn't care. That's how she gets it. She doesn't think that my mom is trying to tell me something. She thinks that my mom doesn't care. Now, if if this mom said, instead of that, said, I'm sorry this happened, let me give you a hug and let's go commiserate together or do something together, 4 hours later she forgets about it and all is gone. And that's what we need to change, what the dynamics in parenting and teachers and schools and all that. So the fact is, you are all familiar with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is done every 2 years. It's basically asking the kids how they feel about all aspects of life. And this is the latest one from last year. And across the country, roughly 1/3 of our kids are feeling sad or unhappy. So if they're already feeling sad and unhappy, and if anything breaks down or any incidents like this happens, then they are more likely to attempt suicide and be at risk. I mean, I don't want to show all this data, but if you continue with it, 20% are already thinking about suicide, 14% are already making plans, and 8% are already attempting suicide. So it's not somebody else's kid. It's your kid and my kid and everybody's kid is at risk, and we have to figure that out. Why is this happening like this? Hey, David, let me give you my I think what they did is translated the PDF to PowerPoint. If you can, I'll talk about these things while you're doing it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Tennessee network, which is, so in Tennessee, actually, there is a program that Scott here is one of the founders and continues to run it here. And they're doing a much better job than most other states. Yet he will tell you, and I will show you, that unfortunately, despite that, suicide is still going up. Now, that's deceiving because everybody will say, well, if you're doing a good job, why is it going up? Well, try if they're not doing anything, what it would be. If they were not doing what they were doing, it's probably going to be about 20, 30, 40% much higher than it is now. So you can't measure just by absolute numbers, are they going down or not. Look at the entire country trend or the whole world trend, and if it's going higher than your area, that means you are doing a better job than others, even though you didn't reduce the rate. All right, well, that was good. You got it very fast. Amazing. All right, so this is, it started one of the first, actually, Tennessee was a year ahead of Kentucky. We pretty much started state suicide together, prevention. I was involved with the official program in the beginning, and then I gave up out of frustration because it became more bureaucracy, and then I continued to just do whatever I could do. But in the Tennessee program actually continued pretty good. But here's what you see, the data in Tennessee. It's not awful compared to other places. It's still bad, and it's still getting worse. Like you see, the rates are going up. And compared to the US, there was a huge shut-up in the last two years. I don't know the specifics, what is happening in Tennessee worse than the country, but it is bad. And it is actually now getting higher than motor vehicle accidents in the state. So there is a problem, and they are trying their best, but from experience, I know they probably have zero resources and not much help to do what they need to do. And again, this is what really makes me mad all the time, because one admission, just one kid admitted, and this cost is similar in Kentucky and Tennessee, for attempted suicide, is almost $32,000 for one admission. If we put those in prevention, we probably prevent about 20 or 30 admissions. And that's the sad part. We pay for treatment that we know it's not going to work, but we wouldn't put any money in prevention rather than waiting for the treatment. And there are other numbers just comparing, Tennessee. These are all numbers you can find on the Tennessee program website. They have really good information there, and I think Scott is giving you folders with many information from there. I wanted to make a little bit difference about what self-harm behavior and suicide, because that's very confusing to them. Many people see somebody with several cuts on their arms and they think they're suicidal. Self-harm is a completely different ballgame. That doesn't mean it doesn't end in suicide sometimes, or it doesn't end up in death sometimes. But the mechanism is different, the thought process is different, everything about it is different. So self-harm is basically, the easiest way to summarize this, kids do it because they are in so much anguish, so much mental pain, that when they cause physical pain, they feel better. It's like pain relief. of course, with teens who don't know what's fatal and what is not, I had one who cut her neck here, ended up cutting her jugular vein, and they can die from it. But they are not trying to die. They are trying to relieve their anguish. And physiologically, those of you who like to know about physiology of the brain and neurons, and when you cause major physical pain, your brain dumps endorphins. Endorphins are like morphine. So basically, the more you do it, the more addicted you become to it. So if you are self-cutting twice a week, you start cutting 3 times a week, 5 times a week, and it gets more and more if it's not treated, because it's just like addiction to any drug. The more your brain makes of these endorphins, the more you need from them, you keep repeating it. And those are just multiple examples of self-harm. And where you see it is a lot among females, especially college student females. First-year college student females have the highest rate. People who are, or kids who are using drugs, kids who are having conduct problem or fights and things like that. But the ones that I see the most are either eating disorder patients or patients who had a family history of either abuse or neglect or family violence. Most of the kids who were sexually abused at young age do fine until they start going through puberty. And when they start going through puberty and start making hormone, that's when it starts hitting them, starting having those nightmares and start remembering things without understanding why did that happen. That's when you start seeing this. And that's why we should never make light of sexual assault and insult. And it doesn't matter if it's a woman, if it's a boy, if it's a girl. And when I'm going through hell just listening to now we're trivializing this in the face of a political campaign, and it shouldn't be. That's part of society like this, because I'm seeing the consequences of what these kids are going through every day. And women who were sexually assaulted or abused tell me the same thing. When I was a gynecologist, I dealt a lot with adult women who also were victims, and they were doing self-harm and more. But you see a lot more in the teenage years. Now, many of the interpretation of it is, you cannot read this article and that article, but for the most part, they all agree, and it is a way to express some turmoil, some problem in their emotions. It is actually a way to prevent them from killing themselves. They use it as a way to prevent being suicidal, some of them. So they're less likely to attempt suicide. And some of them see it as a way, I didn't do well, I should punish myself one way, and they do it to do that. So I'm bringing this up because it's really important. I see a lot of people who are therapists, and they approach treatment of self-harm the same way they approach severe depression and suicidal ideation. They're not, and your approach to them has to be different, and you have to focus on things in a different way. Now, there are a lot of types. Any of you who have a weak stomach, don't look at the next couple of slides because there are some graphic pictures. But this is the most common type. It's called stereotypical type, which you see it in kids who are in juvenile detention or in a psychiatric unit. It's a fixed pattern of doing the same thing, like banging your head all the time or biting your finger or doing something like that, the same repetitive movement or stereotypical. This is the superficial or the moderate type, which we see the most of it, and you can see it anywhere. I mean, I have seen anywhere from 2 cuts to 600 cuts on one arm or on a back or on a thigh or anywhere. And some use needles, some use cigarette burns. It's lots of things. The worst one is really the next slide is awful. So if you want to cover your eyes, do. This is what we call the major one, and where they do really outrageous things. I mean, from cutting their toes or their fingers to destroying their eyes. I had one person who cut one ear, damaged one eye, and cut 3 fingers on one hand. So there are lots of bad things that you can see sometimes. But again, this all is not suicide. So I just wanted to make that point. Then we'll move into, okay, what do we do? Right? This is the question that keeps coming. What can we do? I think we should start, at least my approach is this. We start with educating people about suicide, with understanding this. And the reason I say this is if you are interested in knowing something about teens, probably the best study ever done, it's called the Adolescent Health Study, or AD Health Study. You can find it on public domains like CDC website or anything. It's a study that started in 1984, involved 157,000 kids in 6th grade in 37 different countries, 5 different continents. And all they did was interview these kids, no intervention, just interview them every year, and they will follow them until they are all dead. And lots of conclusions. It's still ongoing. But this is the most important conclusion of all, which to me is common sense, which I knew when I was a kid. My father used to tell me the same thing. All you need to live good or to be successful, you have somebody to care about you, a place to talk to this person, and something useful to do. There is a very old Arabic poet who said, if you are young, if you have money, and if you have free time, then you're in trouble. And that's the reality. If we are not doing something useful and we have the resources that we don't know what to do them, we'll get in trouble. But the fact is, what this study found is that this is the teenager who finds at least one adult that they can talk to or care about them. And they have a place where they can interact with that kid. And you give them something useful to do, they're going to be fine. They will be contributors to society, and they are not going to be suicidal. They're not going to be pregnant. They're not going to be drug abusers. In all aspects of life, they do better. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. I was number 9 of 10 kids in my family, and we had nothing. We had one room, no running water, and no electricity, and whatever. And the least educated kid in my family, which is my youngest sister, has a master's degree. It's not about how much money you have. It's what the relationship with your parents, how were you raised, what is important in life, and how hard are you willing to work to get to you. So that's really the key thing. And when I mentioned to you that I get 200-300 emails, this is what it is about. There's our kids who tell me, I know it's 2 in the morning, you're not going to see it, but I know you care enough that you will feel what I feel, and that's the difference between life and death for them. And that's what if it makes me mad sometimes when a kid comes to the clinic. I have so many, you have been to my clinic a few times. They would come to the clinic and say, I just came today to get a hug. Why can't you get a hug at home? Right? What are we doing as parents and society? And, because a lot of parents, in some of the areas I work with in rural Kentucky, when we go to schools, 90% of the kids we see don't have 2 parents. They're living with, the latest example, I had a 32-year-old woman who has 6 kids from 6 different fathers. And what do you expect these kids to go through? Who is their support system? Who are they going to talk to? So we can't continue to blame the kid, right? So the bottom line is we need to get the kids themselves, the parents, and the teachers, the educators together. That's where we start. We can't start from top down, from the government rules and psychiatric hospitals. Psychiatrists are great healthcare providers, but they're not a front line. They're not into prevention. We need them to support us at the end, not to start with. We need to start at the bottom, which is the parent needs to notice if the kid is not doing well. The teacher needs to notice if a kid is not himself. Teens themselves need to notice that. We start with the teens. I personally start with the teens in the schools. And I always remember this young lady who said, in the beginning, she told me about another kid who was thinking and making plans of suicide. And she said, it took me so much to tell you because I was afraid she's going to be mad at me. And then I thought, well, I'd rather have a mad friend than a dead friend. And that's what we teach them. It's okay for them to be mad at you today. If you notice something or problem, ask for help. So we start there. Then we get to the parents, the PTOs, anywhere we can get to the parents. So we tell them, you watch for your kids. You try to do something with your kids. Talk to them. Do something with them. We want the teachers to be involved and also do something with the kids. If you go back and look at the same YRBS, this Youth Risk Behavior Survey, you're going to see a chunk of time between 1993 and 1999 where every teen outcome was getting better. And the only thing different, we had 5,000 after-school programs that were federally funded around the country. So the kids had something to do after school. Because if you think about it, when kids get out of school at 3, parents are at work, that's when they get in trouble the most of the time. Then unfortunately, The next administration decided to shut them all off, and we immediately, in 2002, everything started going up again. And that confirms that if we do something simple, we can help the kid. So we need to increase the awareness here, like we talk about it. Get rid of the myths, which is the biggest one of all, is when talk about suicide, people, you will give them ideas about suicide. It's like talk about sex will make them have sex, and talk about drugs will make them use them. This is proven in so many million times that it's not the case, and knowledge is power. The more you talk about something, the better it's going to get. So we need to get rid of those things. We need to learn what do kids show, what signs they show. So use the media, use churches, civic organizations, any way you can to create awareness. I'll give you a simple, quick example. This in New Zealand, because some people who wanted to make money off of tragedy of others told the government that the treatment model is the only way to reduce suicide. That was in 1992. And the rate in youth suicide was 12.9 in New Zealand. In 2009, the rate was already 17.9, and they still continued that. And they were arguing with them that we should not allow the media or anybody to talk about it because it will make copycats and more. They got so bad that a mom who would talk to the media about her kid who died from suicide would go to jail. And I was sent there to help in 2010 and challenge those people to national TV to talk about it. And we created a new atmosphere. And now in the last 6 years in New Zealand, it's already going down. So, I mean, sometimes you have to be forceful and just don't take what you hear on Fox News for granted. It's just things that you really need to focus on, and not just the internet. The biggest problem is there are so many websites that tell you myths and untruths. And if you don't know the difference, you think everything you read is correct. Just because it's written on TV screen or on internet doesn't make it's true. So this is the myth. We need to get rid of the fact that, no, we can talk about it. The more we talk, the better we are. That suicide is impulsive and there is nothing to do about it. Not true. Again, those kids, if they knew that there's someone to talk to, they're less likely to do it. And so we need to let them know ahead of time that there is a teacher, a counselor, a doctor, a parent that they can talk to. We need to take very seriously any signs like threats of suicide or somebody who's already attempted suicide, somebody who feels not happy, not doing well. If it's your kid or your neighbor's kid or your classmate or anyone. Any one of us can do this. It's not like you can't notice these things, but we choose to ignore them usually. It's more convenient to most of us to ignore things. If a kid is making final arrangements and talking things like I'd rather be dead or I wish I was dead and so forth. I don't want to do a million sentences, but anything that indicates thinking about death or planning death or considering death. And we should get rid of the myths that, no, well, they're just not serious. They just want attention. Yeah, exactly. They want attention because they feel bad. They feel lonely. And because that's the argument I hear from a lot of parents when their kids, oh, she just swallowed 2 aspirin. Well, the average 15-year-old doesn't know the difference. There are kids who think if I take 2 aspirins, I'll be dead. And kids who think if I shoot myself in the head, I won't be dead. So don't ignore those things. There is no such a thing as not serious attempt. Every attempt is serious, regardless of what it was. And we need to pay attention to it. We shouldn't keep it secret. We should share it with the neighbor, with the teacher. So if that happens again, we need to get rid of that stigma that, oh, my kid attempted suicide, I'm so embarrassed. Well, you either share it and work on it, or your kid will be dead. So choose. You want him to live or you don't. If there is any change in behavior, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter what it is. If they're sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, eating too little. A girl who used to use tons of makeup all of a sudden doesn't really care if she takes a shower for a week or no. Any change like this is an indication of problem. And that's all you need to do. Ask, why is this problem? What is going on? What is happening? Anyone can ask. Again, you can be a nurse or a parent or a school teacher. Any of those can ask those questions. If you see them giving away stuff that they really valued, like their driver license or something that they always loved, or making rounds and saying goodbyes to people, or just anything indicating thinking about Or you'll hear kids thinking about funerals. Again, kids under age 17, 18 don't have abstract thinking. They don't know that they're not coming back. They will, like when you see, so, people used to say if you do media coverage, then you'll have copycats. No, if we have media coverage that focuses on the tragedy, not glorifying the effect, because that's what used to happen. Oh, somebody dies from suicide and say, poor so-and-so who was such a great student and a wonderful athlete. And so the other kids, wow, he's becoming famous, maybe I should do the same. We can't do it that way. We can just say the truth. This is a tragedy. This kid is dead, and focus on what it's going to do to his classmates and his family and other things. Then the media has a great role to do in this. Because most of them, when I talk to these kids, they think they will be watching their funeral. And say, see, when I'm dead, I will see how she's going to feel that she dumped me. We need to understand this. They don't really believe they're not coming back, that they're really dead. They watch Schwarzenegger getting hit 1,000,000 times in a movie and then stands up and walk, right? So shooting yourself is not going to kill you. So you have to have that in mind when you talk about it. And be prepared to ask questions or to answer questions. It doesn't matter if you can answer them. There is no right and wrong. The most important piece of all of it is for the kid to feel that you care. The reason the 800 numbers don't work with teens is they tell me all the same thing. The moment I hear the voice on the other side, I feel they're just doing their job because they're being paid for it. They don't give a damn about me. That's it. If they feel that, and teens are amazing. They always know if you care or just doing your job. And this is what I teach my residents. The first rule is you go in the room. If you are just writing and following your computer screen, forget about getting any information with them. You have to look at them in the eye, make eye contact, show that you actually care about them, and they would know it. Then they will answer your questions, be with you. Be empathetic and neutral. Ask very specific questions later on, but be just supportive. Show how much you care and that you want to help them and you want to do fine with them, or see what you can do. And if there is something new that happens that tip them off, have in mind that the vast majority of not the same day suicide, but all the ones that are planning suicide, 80% of them will try to share that or ask for help. The problem is, it's different. Females usually display more internalizations, depression, inside behavior, isolation. Boys do the opposite. They usually start causing trouble or hitting each other or just causing havoc. A lot of what you see in about 1% of all suicides, of all shootings by police, usually is started by somebody wanting to be shot. That's suicide by police, essentially. That's an easy way for them. I don't have a gun, I'll just go pretend to do something and have the police shoot me. So that's one thing, if we do our job right, we can reduce very quickly, because it's an easy way to do it, and it's making society go bananas there. Again, listen to their hopeless statements. Anything that indicates that they feel no hope tells you that they are a step away from being dead. And you can tell them simple things, like, I'm glad you told me. I'm here to help you. I'm not going to leave you alone. I will tell somebody else. Just anything that indicates support. And by no means don't tell them something that reinforces to them that you don't care. When you tell them, oh, it's just a phase, it's passing out. Oh, just get over it. This is the one that parents do the most. I'm not here banging on parents, but that's the fact of life. A lot of time when they see their teen in trouble, they'll say, oh, just get over it and move in. That's the worst thing a teenager who is thinking about suicide can hear. So, try not to use things like these. Just be sympathetic, be there, be attentive to them. And most important, don't let them bargain you away from helping them. Stay with them, call someone if you're not comfortable. When I started doing this, and this is, by the way, one small part I do this 24/7 for the last 16 years, and I'll share why. But the key thing, the first question I ask myself, what would I do when I fail? If I'm trying to help somebody and he's dead tomorrow, I'm going to feel really awful. And then it hit me, so if I have 10 suicidal kids and choose to do nothing, I have 10 dead kids. And if I do something and fail 9 times, I still have 1 live kid. And that's when I decided it's worth it. Because nobody's perfect. And I don't have the notion that we will always succeed. But if 9 failures and 1 is still alive, that's still better than 10 dead. And you know what? I've worked with 22,000 kids since October of 2000. Every one of them is still alive and well and doing fine. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I will fail one day or the other, but it doesn't matter. It's just the long-term work is worth it. And we need to remind teens that suicide doesn't really take away your pain as a teenager. It just gives it to somebody else, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your classmate. So we all need to do something like try to ask questions, respond to these emotions, encourage these kids to do something. And I'll share with you what is it that we did in Kentucky as a whole, in addition to these general things, and where we stand now. So I started something called Stop Youth Suicide campaign in the year 2000. And my goal at the time was, we'll just have 1 year to create awareness about suicide. I never thought I'll be working. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a teen adolescent specialist. I'm a specialist in teenagers, but not specifically a psychiatrist. So I thought we'll create awareness because the coroner called me and said, I am tired of dealing with dead kids, from suicide. Every month I get 4 to 6 kids in the coroner's office to deal with. So what can we do? So I thought, okay, we'll do that. We did a survey and found that 71% of the people in Kentucky know someone who died from suicide, but only 13% knew that suicide is the second leading cause of death. And that really brought, how can that be? So everybody knows someone who died from suicide, but they never think that it also my neighbor and my other neighbor and my relative and everybody else has the same problem. So we started like this with big mayor's office announcement and governor announcement and a media event and something like that. And we started this website. And I thought that's it. After a year, I've done my job and created awareness about the subject and move on. But then, we started doing, in the same year, we chose to do another activity, which was an idea of one of my medical students, actually. Why don't we get teens together on Valentine's Day or the day before Valentine's Day when everyone who doesn't have a date is feeling bad and have them call other teens with a positive message. I didn't quite even understand it in the beginning, but when we tried it, and it was amazing. The teens who are making the calls on sending text or emails with a positive message felt great, and the kids who received them felt great. So now we started, I think the first year we had 40 kids and about 600 calls. Last year we had 600 kids and about 6,000 calls. So small things like that make a difference in the community. The first 2-3 years alone, I had that many emails and phone calls asking for help. So I couldn't stop. Somebody needs help, I can't tell them no, so we continue. Then we started working with the government. Like Tennessee, we started a statewide program. I was the first chairman of their executive committee back in 2000. But then I got frustrated because all they wanted to do is, let's train people on QPR, which is question, persuade, refer. It's a good program, but basically a program that was designed to make somebody a millionaire, nothing else. Because if somebody can show me one saved life through it, I'll be applauding it. But the fact is, anytime I see somebody with their main goal making money, I have doubt that it's going to help people. And that's what that is. Because what it is question, persuade, refer. Refer where? Yeah, try it, refer to child psychiatry and see how long it's going to take you to get an appointment there. So we need something different. We need more involved, something feasible that actually can be done. So anyhow, I continued to work with whomever volunteers I can get and still help the state program do what they want to do, but mostly work with school systems and parents and anyone who wants to work. We worked on the government. We passed a few years ago this bill which mandated all teachers in school, school counselor, everybody gets trained in suicide prevention. It was signed into law and it's implemented. This is being done. So that's another step that helped the community, that you're more comfortable as a teacher or a counselor if you have gone through a few hours of understanding what you are dealing with rather than having to deal with a situation that you have no idea what to do with. So that also helped. But this is the fact. This data is from the CDC, not my data. I intentionally chose data from independent things to show you. Kentucky was always above the national average in suicide. For the last, since data has been collected, we were above the national average. Here is the last year we have data in. 13 and 15, we have the same number. For the first time in our history, we are below the national average in considered attempt, in plans to commit suicide, in attempted suicide ending up in the hospital. And that's a huge thing considering that the reality is I have access to only about 10 counties, real access where I actually work with the school system and we meet with everybody in the schools and we provide help and counseling in the school. This is one of the counties we work with. Now, have in mind that we have access only to the kids in school. So the 18 to 24, we don't have access to. If you take the 18 to 24 and just look at the 17, this number is 0. This county used to average 6 suicides per year. Since 2007, we had 0 suicides. That's 9 years running. The state, because of our efforts and other, we are still trying to keep the state in check. But again, this is in part because the counties that we are working with are going down while the rest of the state is going up. So it ends up showing like this. This is a conference we do every single year. And I never had funded, so some of it I pay from my own pocket, some we get other people, because I don't want to charge parents or teachers, or for the most part, most people who attend don't pay. And I have friends across the globe. We bring them to speak about all aspects of teen life. If you look at the program, you will see we're talking about sex and drugs and STDs and pregnancies and suicide and depression and anxiety and ADHD. And every aspect of teen life is covered every year. And unfortunately, again, I used to get a little bit of help, maybe $5,000, $6,000 a year to add up. And we lost that as of this year, but we'll keep trying. But we've done this 16 years in a row without funding. And it is making an amazing change in the community because more and more parents, teachers are more comfortable with teen issues. This is just an example of what works and what doesn't work. This is a program that just separated people from guns. Here's how much it saved: 3,612 lives. Compared to even if you separate them from carbon monoxide poisoning, if you do psychotherapy in a good way. So anything that you can do can help. And we have to be really down to the ground and understand issues, because to me, gun violence and suicide go together. And we keep arguing about even basic regulations for gun violence, but this is just a silly number to show, right? So we keep scaring the hell out of everybody about ISIS, which is really awful. But really, it killed 4 Americans, while furniture killed 17, and gun violence killed 31. Shouldn't we be doing something about something that's killing 31,000 while spending trillions of dollars on something like that? This is the biggest number that really made me mad when I read about it. So since the establishment of the United States until today, all the wars, all the things that we went through killed 1.4 million Americans. In the last 50 years alone, gun violence has killed 1.5 million Americans. Just think about that for a second. And if we don't start doing something about that, I don't know what we should. The other thing we should change is the stigma and the problem. I know I'm over time, but we'll take another minute or two and we'll be done. Look at the death rates, okay? So how much asthma kills, how much AIDS kills, and how much suicide kills. Now look at how much money we spend on suicide versus all the other things. And that, if it doesn't change, we won't make a big day. If somebody needs to learn more about teens, this is a really great documentary on public television that one of the journalists was then with us in our program, and our teens and the people that we work with. You can just go to kat.com or .org and then type, "What does every teen need?" and you'll find it. I think if you just type this on Google, it will pop up. It's a 55 minutes, but it's worth watching. One of the things we did, and I'll share why I'm showing you this slide. So one of the things we did in New Zealand, for example, in Maori areas, the native Maori areas, it's called South Waikato. And that's an area that used to average 8 suicides every single month. And all we did is something like this. We worked with the community for 2-3 days, and then Because to me, it was so obvious that teens who commit suicide simply can't find somebody to talk to. So we convinced the community, let's have volunteers to be available to the kids at all times. We found about 20 people who agreed. They're not doctors, not psychiatrists, just regular folks, tribal leaders, somebody. We bought 4 cell phones and gave their numbers to all the schools. So any teen, anytime you call one of these numbers, you'll find somebody to talk to, not an 800 number, not somebody paid, somebody who cares. Now, for 5 years, we are down to 6 suicides per year, not per month in that area. So this is another example. This Aborigines lady went back to her tribe in Australia and bought 2 cell phones and did the same. And this is an ABC News feature. They almost cut suicide in their tribe in half, just by having a couple of people who care, who are carrying phones together. Because the bottom line is, our teens are our future. And if we don't take care of them now, we're not going to have productive adults. And it is sad because our 32nd president said this many, many years ago. We cannot build the future for our teens, but we can build our teens for the future. Thank you. I'll stop here and be open to any questions. Questions, comments? Yes?
We've had 2 teen suicides by gun this summer. I'd like to talk. The first is a girl. In January of this year, she found out she was the father of the weekend. She had an attempt like killed in May, just got put in counseling. And in July, went down to the Serenader's house, found the gun that she was using at the time, and shot herself in the face. So the second call, about a month later, the young man, 14-year-old, threw his backpack off of the school bus window. The father thanked him. The boy went down the father's gun in his home, shot himself in the bathroom. Within an hour or 2 of that night.
And that's exactly what we're talking about. It's one case you have that had a reason, had mental health issue. In her case, it's most like a post-traumatic stress when you find that you were incest or something, which is actually fairly common in Appalachia, and we deal with it all the time. But also a failure of the system, because she got counseling, but wasn't. The most common complaint I get from teens when they go to psychologist counseling or mental health providers, it's the system. I'm sure all the people who are providing the care are good people and wanting to do the right thing, but what's their insurance like and how? So the teens tell me, the moment I see my counselor looking at their watch, I'm not going back. The moment I step in a psychiatrist's office and before he even asks me a question, he's writing a prescription, I'm not going back. That's what we need to change. So that system failed. And then, of course, until we realize that we have to keep guns separate from ammunition, I don't care if you have 100 guns, but don't make them easily accessible to kids in a way like this, because then that would have changed the outcome. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes?
My son he's 19, he's a freshman in college in Ohio, but in the last 2 years of his life has gone to 2 funerals for buddies for suicide in a close by county, and one of them was a Boy Scout, but he was an Eagle Scout, etc. But he said, I felt like our troop needed to go and support this family. But in that process, I saw my son struggling too.
Yeah.
There was one time in a frustration time that he said to me something about, I think I would be better to be dead. And just that was,
That's very
that
serious.
moment in time where I just looked at him and said, do I need to bring you to somewhere or get your help because I know you've seen something. And it was just a moment of awakening. So I still, as my son's away from me as a freshman in college, it gives you pause to check in on him a lot. I text him
Absolutely.
almost every day and say, how's it going? Because he's in a, it just, they see their own friends dying and it causes a lot of confusion.
But that's the other failure of the system, because what we should be doing is every time an incident like this is one of the things we do in the counties that I work with in Kentucky, is whenever there's even an attempted suicide, if we hear somebody's admitted from that class, we go and do counseling for the entire school, not just the classroom, the entire. We do group, And at the end of the group, we say, anyone who would like to talk one-on-one will provide you with one-on-one counseling. Because it's, again, the average, he's 19. If he was 17, I would have told him, don't listen to him, take him to help. 19 is more likely to make slightly smarter decisions than the 17.
He's still pretty dumb.
Yeah, but, well, another 5 more years at least, so, right. Yes?
I'm not sure I agree that same-day suicide implies that mental health is not involved. It may imply that there's a new problem and there may be a crisis, and a crisis in preventive services,
Mhm.
which mental health is certainly part of the focus needs to be involved.
Right. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. It's, I didn't mean that it has, I said they never had mental health issues before. That doesn't mean that this is not the start, right? So you are absolutely right. And if they had a support system, like a psychiatrist or a parent, then that would make a difference.
Had mental health issues,
Correct.
but it's never gone to treatment.
Agreed. I have, yeah.
The spectrum, I think, is possibilities, but to me, the important thing is that I don't think we should be trying to necessarily separate out the different areas of medicine in terms of our ability to come together and bring a focus on the problem highlighting one. I feel that we should be trying to work together to amass as many resources for this problem as we can, and unfortunately, I believe problem now less than psychiatry has really been under-resourced.
I agree.
Not being under-acknowledged for how important it is as much as it's called.
No, they have to be part of the team. I don't know if you heard, I have 6 psychologists and 2 child psychiatrists on my team. The difference is we work all together. What I'm saying is that one of the things that I'm arguing with the government officials, and we need to stop saying mental health coverage and physical health coverage. Everything is health. To me, there is no difference. It's the whole team is one unit. You know, it's one aspect of it. To put it mildly, you know, if somebody gets drunk, for example, they are more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely to hit a tree. They're more likely to have sex that they did not plan. To me, it's all one problem, and we have to work as a team together. The only difference is because of the way the healthcare system in the U.S. is set up, is the likelihood of, say, a child psychiatrist or a psychologist doing preventive care, like being in the front line, is very unlikely. So essentially what I'm saying is that we all, teachers, parents, kids, medical providers, should be watching for everything, and then any moment we detect a problem, we work with the psychologist and the child psychiatrist and the mental health providers to provide that care together. That's really the message. If I didn't do it right, then I failed. But that's the message I'm doing, is that we all need to do it together. So I absolutely agree. I don't think we disagree on that.
That might be a good segue to go to our panel discussion. Because
Yeah.
to work together.
So-
So let's